Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. This episode of the Tatiana Show is brought to you by Vaultoro. Vaultoro is a gold hedging solution for the crypto community. One of the challenges of investing in cryptocurrencies is dealing with volatility. Keeping a diversified portfolio is a key to healthy returns. I keep about 10% of my crypto assets in gold using Vaultoro. Vaultoro allows me to open a gold wallet in seconds where I can easily trade with cryptos and gold. What I like about using Vaultoro instead of Tether is that the gold in my Vaultoro wallet is insured, audited, vaulted in Switzerland, and unlike fiat money, gold has increased in value for the last 20 years. Visit vaultoro.gold/Tatiana today and get zero trading fees for the first 3 months. That is vault, like a gold vault, and oro, which is Spanish for gold. Vaultoro, ole! Hey guys, have you heard about the Haven app from the guys over at Open Bazaar? Download Haven now for iOS and Android. Go to gethaven.app. Haven is the world's first privacy-focused shopping application for iOS and Android devices. Why use apps that spy on you? Shop, chat, and send cryptocurrencies privately using Haven. Haven gives you a shopping marketplace, social posts, private chat, and a powerful cryptocurrency multi-wallet all in one mobile app. Download Haven now for iOS and Android. Go to gethaven.app. That's gethaven.app. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Robert Anthony Peters, Robert 3 names on Twitter, and we're going to talk a little bit about his film called Tankman. It's a short film, and it's going to be a kind of a Hong Kong, Tiananmen Square focused episode. We're going to talk about what happened with the Tankman, his film, what's going on in the future with all that. So I'm excited about that. We are not joined with Josh. We're not joined by Josh today, unfortunately, because he's at the hospital. Everything's good, but he's busy. But that's fine because me and Robert, we have our own little rapport. Before we get started, I just want to say a quick thank you to our 2 sponsors of the show, Vaultoro. As you guys know, Vaultoro does all sorts of cool stuff with gold and Bitcoin, and they're launching their own token called Vault. So check it out. Go to vaultoro.gold/Tatiana. And you can also make sure to check out the Haven app. So you may have listened to the show a couple weeks ago where we had Brian Hoffman on from Open Bazaar/Haven. OB1, I think is the name of the VC company that they're with. Anyway, they have finally released their Haven app. It's really cool. Go to gethaven.app and download it. They have it for iOS and Android, and they're not going to spy on you, which is a benefit in this wonderful technologically advanced world that mimics 1984 from time to time. So today we're going to talk with Robert Anthony Peters, and we're going to talk about Tankman. So welcome to the show, Robert. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Very good. So this is your first time on the show, but we've been friends forever. Maybe you could give people a little bit about your professional background, some of your activism that you've been involved in before we dive into the movie, because, you know, you've been working with FIJA, you've been working with FI, and a lot of other kind of acting stuff. So fill us in.
Sure. So I've been a actor for, about 20 years now, and done that professionally in film, stage, done audiobooks, video games, the bigger movies that folks might be familiar with that I've had small roles in, but are The Pursuit of Happiness. Bob Murphy, our mutual friend, was just on his podcast, and he really enjoyed talking about Pursuit of Happiness, and Steve Jobs. Those are my 2 bigger claims to fame. But I've been a libertarian for even longer, and just very passionate about ideas on liberty. I'm on the alumni board with FI, Foundation for Economic Education, FI.org, and on the vice chair of Fully Informed Jury Association, that's FIJA.org, which talks about jury nullification.
You know, we weren't going to talk about that at all, but really quick, you want to give a pitch for FIJA? Because I think it's super cool.
Yeah, so jury nullification is just such an amazingly important issue that people don't know a lot about. You get asked to serve on a jury, and a lot of especially freedom people who know about jury nullification will talk about it and then get kicked off the jury, and that's not the best idea because the jury nullification is so important. And for those who don't know, it's this right that we have that's been derived from the English common law system, of which the U.S. system, justice system, that's its progenitor, we all have this power to decide not just on the evidence, which is what a lot of times courts will say, the judge will instruct you, but that we have the right to decide on the law as well. So if we believe a law is unjust, we can find the defendant not guilty. If we think that the sentence doesn't match the crime, or that the that somebody is being abused somehow through the prosecution, you can find the defendant not guilty. It's within your right. And this has gone back for hundreds of years. And, and people have that natural inclination for that. Some people don't even need to know that there is such a thing as jury nullification. They're just like, this would not be a just outcome if we found them guilty, even if they factually did whatever it was. So this is something that we see with a lot of drug crimes, right? You'll have, and there's particularly sympathetic situations. You have a grandmother who is using medical marijuana to keep her medication down or whatever it may be to relieve nausea. And she's being prosecuted for having an illegal amount of marijuana. And juries will be like, this would not, she may have factually broken the law here, but this would not result in a just outcome if we find her guilty. And, some people like us may be like, hey, these laws shouldn't even be there in the first place. So anybody that comes forward with a drug case, you're able to say, hey, I'm voting my conscience. They are not guilty because they have not done anything wrong. They have not done anything immoral. They've not created a harm. And so it's a really powerful tool. It's really citizens' last check on government. It's almost impossible to get these things repealed, but what we can do is make these laws unenforceable. And this is one of the ways in which alcohol prohibition went away, that there were these prosecutions, attempts at prosecutions, and juries just kept saying, no, nope, not guilty.
Wow, I wish more people knew about that. How long have you guys been out there, and do you feel like the public is actually catching on to this, or do you think people are still pretty much uninformed? Do we need a jury nullification jingle? What's going on?
We definitely need a jury nullification jingle. It's something that the organization has been there for a long time, for decades, several decades. And it's tough. It's such a specific issue that I think a lot of people kind of brush over it, and people think they know about their rights as jurors, or even you have libertarians who think they know about jury nullification, but they really don't, or they'll they'll use it to not get on a jury because prosecutors don't like it and judges don't like it. And so it's something that, people know that some people know if they talk about it, they can get kicked off. So don't talk about it when you're in the courtroom. You want to try to get on a jury because you could save somebody's life with this knowledge. But on top of that, most people just don't even know that this is a power. This is a right that people have. So it's really an important issue. So anybody who would like to support FIJA and its mission, visit fija.org, fija.org, and come and help us. We would love any help you can get. You can do to get the word out.
Do people get in trouble for talking about this? I mean, you mentioned to not mention it on the stand or whatever when you're getting chosen, but I believe that there have actually been some people that got in trouble for distributing literature around this, which is crazy. How does that even happen?
Yeah. So sometimes they'll level charges of jury tampering. This is for people, in particular who are distributing pamphlets out near a courthouse. But this is usually, this is basically always extremely false because the materials are general. FIJA does not campaign for any specific individual or any specific outcome. It's none of our business. We're not saying that you should vote not guilty. We're not saying that about any trial or anyone. It's just we want jurors to know what is in their power and that they do have the power to do that. There may be times where, hey, there's a guy who premeditatively killed somebody, it was a neighbor they were upset at or something like that. Who knows? But we're not saying every trial should be nullified. Far from it. I mean, there are plenty of cases where, the just outcome would be to uphold the law, right?
Of course,
most of us agree. Yeah, stealing, murdering, assaulting, rape, these things are immoral. These things are not good actions, and it's important that we hold people accountable under those circumstances. And we don't even say, hey, this is what you need to find people not guilty over or guilty over anything. We have no dog in that fight. We just think it's important that you know what your rights are and that you know the full panoply of them so you can exercise this one in particular as well as you can. So sometimes they will, accuse people of jury tampering, but those are really more First Amendment issues where they just don't want that information even being out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's important work that you guys are doing. I've had Kirsten on my show before. She's really, really knowledgeable. So I might actually have to revisit doing a whole show about this, but I'm glad we got a little prequel. But we're talking about other kinds of injustice today. Tell me about Tank Man. What is the history behind it? Tell us a little bit about the film. It's 15 minutes. You guys, there's a link in the show notes, and you can click on it. You can watch it on YouTube. You can also bring Robert out to your town and do screenings and engage in community discussions around these issues that are maybe a little bit paralleled in other ways currently. So, tell us a little bit about the film.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I would love to go out. I love traveling with the film and talking about it. So if you have a screening idea for your community, your organization, whatever it may be, drop me a line and let's talk about making that happen. And so part of what I would be doing there would be talking about the history, the background behind Tank Man. So 1989, and it's in China. Communist China, which it's still the Chinese Communist Party in existence.
So we're still in
same political continuity.
Wow, wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Although
you can't get in trouble for this, right? I mean, well, we're going to find out more. I don't mean to at the end, but you'd think that they wouldn't be able to get away with this kind of thing.
You'd like to think so, but it's amazing. Some of these governments can get away with a lot of garbage for a long time, and this is one of those circumstances. But there was a very well-loved reformer who passed away in the earlier part of the year of 1989, and some of the folks who were, just really thought this guy was terrific. They went out and had kind of an impromptu memorial at Tiananmen Square. Tiananmen Square, historic site. It's in the capital, and it's where people historically have aired their grievances. So in 1919, there was a big student protest. This was even, before communism came into China. And so it's just one of those spots that people would historically, it's kind of like when you go visit the White House, like kind of that area in front of it, and there's this perennial group of protesters there. I mean, that's what this is, except people really pay attention to Tiananmen Square. And so this protest, and it kept gathering kind of steam, and more and more people were coming out. I mean, it was primarily a student protest, but there were people in the community, workers, people who sympathized, because a lot of the issues were very global. It was about freedom of speech and freedom of the press and expression and all these kinds of things, and a lot about corruption. So these students, they'd come out of school and they just didn't have opportunities because, as we know, government, there's always a level of corruption, but especially in communist systems where there's so much nepotism and so much, now in particular, there's so much more cronyism too. And just these ways in which people, they felt like they were getting the shaft, right? They were coming out, they were supposed to have these opportunities, and they just disappeared. It was all an illusion. And so they were very frustrated. And so they would gather, and it kept gathering steam. And meanwhile, the Chinese government had their own Cold War with Russia, despite the fact that they were both communist. They couldn't get along. And so Gorbachev is going to come out to meet Deng Xiaoping. And this is a huge news, right? This is just like when Nixon went. I mean, this is a really big deal. Russia is one of the big powers, and they had a big rivalry, their own Cold War with them. So they're going to come, they're going to talk, they're going to make a peace. Like, this is wonderful. This is huge. International media comes out, and they're like thinking, oh, we're going to have all these great photo ops. The student protesters get in the way. All of a sudden, the international media, all they want to do is focus on the protesters and show pictures of them and give them attention. So China, the government of China is really annoyed at this point. And so they say, okay, they try to resolve it. I mean, one of the kind of real tragedies of this circumstance is Deng Xiaoping, the head of China at that time, was really more of a reformist type of a guy. He could go either way, but he had sympathies. Like Xi Jinping right now, he is not a liberal. He's not a reformer. I mean, not that Deng Xiaoping was some huge liberal either, but he was probably the best from our freedom perspective. He was probably the best ruler that China has had since they've been communist. And so they would try to work with the students, but, they're kind of like now, we'll talk more about Hong Kong, their desire to kind of bend towards these reformist demands is very limited. And so didn't gain enough traction. They couldn't get enough resolution to break up the protests. They continued, and then eventually the hardliners kind of caught the ear of Deng Xiaoping and was like, we've got to send in the troops. We've got to resolve this. And they did. And
why do they have to? Why do they have to do that?
Because they can't let this go. The longer this goes on, they feel like the more power it gains, the more traction it gains, the more international attention, the more internal attention. I mean, this is one of the things with communism, right? With particularly these systems. And it's not even so much communism anymore, because communism isn't really the essential element of it. I mean, it's still a problem, but it's really just an autocratic dictatorial regime. It's a totalitarian, on the way to being a totalitarian regime, and they can't tolerate dissent. If you step out of line, people are going to see that I guess the mindset is just that if there are people who are stepping out of line, it's showing that we are weak, and we can't show any weakness. We have to be the strength of everyone. Everybody can look to us, and we can solve all the problems. We commit no errors. If we do, they're in the distant past, committed by somebody else, and we can make some tentative requests for forgiveness about that. But even 30 years later, they can't admit the error of killing thousands of people in Tiananmen Square.
That was what I found really interesting, because I wasn't so familiar with that incident. But apparently, even now, when you go to China, you're not allowed to talk about it in Tiananmen Square.
Oh no!
What is that about?
Oh yeah, and you can't, you can't do anything there that would resemble it. I mean, they're one of the things. So China has this WeChat, right? It's and Weibo, and these things they're like Facebook, right? But it's government controlled, and so they had they shut it down for maintenance from about June 1st to June 8th, something like that. June 4th is the anniversary of Tiananmen Square. It's an interesting time to shut it down for maintenance. Oh yeah. I mean, you can't mention Tiananmen Square in any sort of context. You can't say there was a liquor company there who, full well knowing what they were doing, but they had 6489 I'm pretty sure that was the name of it. It was some sort of reference to Tiananmen Square, June 4th, 1989. And the people who made that got prosecuted. I have a friend who tried to make me, it was like a bag or something like that with my movie poster on it. And it went to China, and she had sent the image over to China to have that created. And they wrote back and said, we can't make this. Do you have any other image that we can use? And she's like, no,
Wow.
that's what I want. They said, we'll have to refund you your money because we can't make this. And it's amazing for a government that for the most part denies that, anything bad even really happened. So many people know about it. They know enough to know that they can't do anything to display this or talk about this. But it's one of those things where people can't talk about it.
Wow. So why don't we dive into the movie and then we can talk a little bit about what's going on in Hong Kong, because this is riveting, but I think that the context of the movie and kind of telling the story a little bit through that will help people understand a bit better. What was your approach?
So I've always been like so many people, right? That image, the still photograph of Tank Man is it's voted by Time as one of the most significant images of the 20th century. It's extremely powerful, always been an influential thing in my life. And I've always wondered, who is this guy? Like who's going to walk right in front of a tank, right? I mean, it's crazy.
So brave. I mean,
yeah.
It's wild, but
oh yeah,
yeah,
totally. You just think like, you look at that and you say like, that is a hero, right? I mean, and so I've always wondered, and it's part of this might be because of my acting background. I always want to know what's the backstory, what's the motivation. And so I created a backstory for this guy. What are the circumstances under which he decided to walk in front of this tank? And so, I just, my friend Patrick Reasonover, who runs an organization called Taliesin Nexus, and what they do is they provide funding for, freedom-oriented people to create, who are earlier in their careers to create, pro-freedom content. And so he was always asking me, what ideas do you have? And so I said, well, I've always kind of thought about this. And so he said, you got to submit it. And so I did. I was a little reluctant too, because filmmaking is a lot of hard work and acting is so easy. But you've got to worry about everything if you're a director or producer. And so, but went to their committee and they ended up liking it. They provided us with a budget. We've shot it. And, it's just been doing really well. We've been screening around the world in places that I never thought it would even be screening in, like Iran and Venezuela, places that really need the message. But all over, we've won Best of Fests, Best Short Films. We just won Best Short a couple months ago at the Whistleblower Summit in Washington, D.C. We screened in the Senate Hart Building, which was awesome. And we've won some audience favorite awards. We won that at the Anthem Film Festival, part of Freedom Fest. So, audiences have been really responding to it, which of course makes me and everybody who's been behind it really pleased. It's been really exciting to see.
So, first of all, congratulations. That's amazing. I didn't even know you'd been winning all these awards. I see some stuff on social media. What's your social media real quick?
I'm either Robert Anthony Peters, like on Facebook or Twitter, Robert 3 names. Tankman the movie is the website, is the Facebook, is Twitter, Instagram. Tankman the movie is the place to go to follow Tankman. Robert Anthony Peters or Robert 3 names is the way to follow me wherever.
Okay, cool. So now you've told us a little bit about the film, but you were actually in Hong Kong somewhat recently, and now there's a lot of stuff going on. So if you could give us a little bit of a lead-in into what brought you there, what did you see, what was your time like there, and any kind of background info that you learned on the ground.
Yeah, so we screened it in Hong Kong at a film festival, which was awesome. But we were there in the midst of these protests, and this was kind of in the earlier part. I mean, it was still a big deal. Like 2 weeks before I was there, I think there were about 2 million people at one of the protests. So, definitely, and this is out of a population of 7 million. This is my favorite, is there was, yeah, exactly.
A third, 1/7 of the population is in the streets, because they have over 1 million people protesting it.
Oh, yeah. No, well, so there was this one weekend in about mid-June where 1 million, so, like 15% of the population comes out, which is, an amazing number. Could you imagine 15% of the U.S. all coming out one day to protest something? Unheard of. I mean, insane. You don't even get that 15% of the, does even a candidate get 15% of the population to vote for them? I mean, hardly. And so 15% of the population is on the streets, men, women, children, old people, everybody. And then the leadership of Hong Kong says, okay, we're going to table this extradition bill. And then, but the people know they haven't used the official language, which now they've used, but it's a little too late at this point, where they've withdrawn. But the people at the time were like, no, you didn't withdraw it. All you did was kind of tell us things. You won't use the official language to pull it. You're just trying to make us, placate us. The next week, 2 million people come out, double that, like 30% of the population is on the streets protesting. Can you imagine? And this is Hong Kong, right? These are incredibly industrious people. I mean, they are not given to protests. Yes, they've had protests in the past. They've had a lot of people turn out for certain things, but it's usually rather short-lived. And, most of these people, if they want a weekend, right? I mean, they want a Saturday and Sunday off. Sundays, they are coming out in droves to protest. And it's just been amazing. So I was there, and the protests had continued since then, and they continue obviously till to today currently. I was there marching with them, and I just found it was an amazing experience. You see such a cross section of the population, and one of the things that struck me was just how kind of lovely and normal, everybody was. Like, sometimes we'll get protests, right? But it'll bring out a lot of fringe elements, and you're like, well, like maybe you agree with something. You're like, do I really want to spend time with these people who are out there? Sometimes it's just people with, just some kind of axe to grind, whatever it is, they're going to join in, or they're kind of political extremists, or they're just, not kind of these were average, everyday people. I mean, it was grandmothers, it was people with their children, it was a lot of students, and they're not these rough looking students. They're not punk students. These are clean cut students who are genuinely concerned, and they have every right to be, because in 28 years, Hong Kong loses its autonomy. So in 1997, the lease that the UK had on Hong Kong expired. And fortunately, before that, Margaret Thatcher was in power and had negotiated the handover terms with Deng Xiaoping, and said, hey, these people are used to a certain set of rules and rights. They expect their due process, their judicial system, protection of property, protection of freedom of speech, all of these different aspects. And they need to retain that. And so they agreed to, okay, a period of 50 years, Hong Kong will retain its autonomy from 1997 to 2047. But there's just, new power in town in Beijing, and they can't wait for 2047. So they keep trying to make these little encroachments. And the population, as you get closer, is getting more and more nervous. There's a big effort in the country, in Hong Kong, to go into mainland China and to try to teach people about democracy and persuade them to view the value of democracy, because they're like, listen, we can't change the government and we can't keep our way of life in Hong Kong, but maybe we can change how China is. So China keeps viewing these things as a threat, and that's why they wanted that extradition bill. So they can go into Hong Kong and pull people and say, hey, we're charging you with a crime. You've committed a crime against China, against our way of life. It's Hong Kong is technically part of China now. They call it two countries, one system. And so, two systems, one country, where they each operate differently, but Hong Kong is part of China, and they're supposed to have that autonomy, but China's not allowing that anymore. They pulled they disappeared some booksellers, and this has been written about a little bit, but not a lot. And of course, these are people who are bearing the ideas out, right? The booksellers are the people who are, providing this literature with these dangerous ideas. And that's what China is most afraid of, is ideas. That's why they limit their media and control their media so much. Hong Kong is such a threat because Hong Kong still has some independent journalists left, although they keep getting pushed out. But thanks to the internet, there are these ways in which they can communicate. And of course, China's famous for its firewall, right? You can't view my movie in China. It's not going to happen. It's going to get blocked by a firewall. And so many things. You Google, Yahoo, Bing, every search engine is in cahoots with China. If they're going to be in China, then China says, hey, these are the rules. One of it, which is things like, you can go on Google.com in China. You can Google Tankman. You can Google Tiananmen Square massacre. And you know what will show up? Pictures of tourists at Tiananmen Square. You will never in China, through normal ways of doing things outside of a VPN, you will never see that picture that we are all so familiar with. It's so clamped down, and they're so afraid of truth coming out.
That is just completely unfathomable. I mean, I guess I just am not that educated about what's going on over there. That's wild. What was the reaction of the people to you being there? And also, are you like, hey, I'm here making a Tiananmen Square movie? And they're like, shh, like, how does that work?
They were grateful. They were really, really grateful that people outside care, and that they were grateful and shocked that I knew, especially during the protests, people would be like, do you know why we're here? I'm like, yeah. Do you know about this? I'm like, yeah. And they were just so grateful and happy. And they were like, please, tell people. And so I've kind of made this my mission now, that I really want. I mean, if you go to, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, I'm constantly, reposting articles about what's going on in there, because I think it's so important that we know these are like the founding fathers of America. I mean, this is their version of the American Revolution. And they're really trying to fight for their liberties against what they now feel is a dangerous colonial power. I mean, they felt some of that. I mean, they were a legit colony of the UK, and they had aspects that they didn't like of that. But now that they are facing China, they're like, oh boy. Some people are actually saying, we want to be ruled by the UK again. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the ideal. It seems like autonomy would be the ideal. That's going to be a really tough thing for them to do, because they don't have any sort of military. They don't have any way of really protecting themselves from China except to bear the pressure of the world on China. And China keeps trying to say, this is an internal problem. Everybody else, mind your business. Don't get involved. And, it's important, though, that we know and we talk about it and we say, hey, we're watching. You can't just kill these people. You can't just disappear them. You can't be instituting programs that violate their rights. Another kind of interesting program that I want to hint on just about that information aspect was, and I learned this when I was there, I didn't know this before, is that China wanted to create a national education policy, right? We hear about that in the US. There's a lot of people who say, hey, everybody should be learning the same thing. And there's a lot of people who say that's a great idea. Well, but then there's some of us, I'm sure you and a lot of your listeners share this with me, that you're like skeptical. Hey, I don't want Washington deciding what our local kids learn, for a lot of reasons. But one in which in particular is nobody has the lock on what, the truth is. There's a lot of different ways of understanding history, let's say. And when you have the Chinese government saying, okay, here's the history, here's the outline, here's what you guys are going to learn. And then you get to June 4th, 1989, and you have, nothing happened, which is exactly what I went to an exhibit there at the Hong Kong Museum of History. And there was an exhibit sponsored by Beijing. And the way I kind of have been describing it is, let's say Trump was tasked with creating a history exhibit of the U.S., cover U.S. history. You'd be like, things were crap here, and then I came in and everything was great. And everything's just going to keep getting better. Or, the U.S. came into power and everything was great. It'd be like glossing over and ignoring slavery and the Civil War. There is nothing in this exhibit about any sort of dissent, any sort of failure, nothing about the 70 million people who have died in the 20th century in China by their government, nothing about the 30 million people who have died from 1958 to 1960 in China. I mean, these are not, small numbers, right? These are huge incidents. And this exhibit treated none of that. Now, I could understand, you want to create an exhibit, you want some positivity, some encouragement, but you have to acknowledge some flaws, some failures, some weak points. None of that whatsoever. And so, this is a real danger. And so it's the lesson. There's so many lessons for us in the rest of the world as well, right? You don't want the government controlling all these aspects. You don't want the government controlling what you're taught and what you learn. It's incredibly dangerous.
I can see that. Really, we complain about what it's like in the U.S., and I guess it could be even worse. Terrible thing to look forward to. Do you think that, so I've heard that, some random whispers that, the CIA is trying to foment rebellion in Hong Kong. Do you think that there's any truth to that? Is there a case to be made for the Chinese government?
I've heard people say that, that the CIA is trying to foment rebellion. Is there truth to it? Probably. The CIA is like everywhere trying to foment rebellion, right? I've heard people say the Chinese government is there. This is a false flag operation, and the Chinese government is there trying to, foment issues. Is that true? Yeah, probably in certain aspects. But I can tell you that the average everyday person is knowledgeable about the problems and deeply cares. And these people aren't all on the payroll. I met them, I've talked with them, I've hung out with them. These are people who are genuinely concerned. And so to what CIA and China may be both involved, they're probably both involved in this in some way, but they're just trying to step in front of a parade that's already marching. This is a groundswell. This is a grassroots campaign. This is not AstroTurf. This is not 2 million people got a check from the CIA. And these are not leaders who are constantly being prosecuted and persecuted and being thrown in jail at tools of the CIA. I've met with some of them, and these are people who are working really hard and care deeply and, are not, just set up with huge bank accounts and islands that they can go off to after all this blows over. It's just not the nature of this. So, there could be these conspiratorial elements are true, sure, but it doesn't defeat the fact that the regular person, the people who are doing this, they're not dupes. They know what they're doing. They're out there and they're protesting about a very, very real concern, and they're facing very real danger at this point as well. There's a woman who lost an eye, and that's.
Tell me a little bit about that, because your profile picture has you covering your eye.
So there's this campaign that was started by this Korean actor in support and solidarity with Hong Kong. There was a woman who her eye was shot out by the rubber bullets that are being fired randomly and dangerously by the police. And they're violating all sorts of protocol for how police should be behaving during riots. And so part of that solidarity campaign is to take a photo and use that as your profile pic of you covering your left eye with your left hand. And that's been something that people who are supporting Hong Kong have been doing. A campaign that I'm hoping to start, because October 1st is the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. And so what I'm urging people to do is basically take a profile pic like the Hong Kong protesters. They're wearing surgical masks over their mouth, in part to hide their identity, to hide their face, but also because of the tear gas that's constantly being fired at them to help filter some of that out. So if you will, by October 1st, take a picture with a surgical mask. They're super cheap. You can buy 100 for less than $10 on Amazon. Hand it out to your friends. Get people to take photos with that surgical mask over their mouth and use that as your profile pic. So October 1st, when China is trying to celebrate its 70th anniversary, they can look online and see the world knows what they're doing and that we're watching and that we care and that we stand with Hong Kong.
That's a wild and awesome, cool idea. I like that a lot. I'm going to do that myself. We have to wrap, but I have one last question. What do you think is the worst case scenario here? I mean, because I heard from a friend of mine, he does some business in China. He says that the issue with this protest is that it can also spark protests in other places in China where there's some, like destabilization already existing. And then this could have a toppling effect. So his idea was that, they're going to basically mow these people down because otherwise it's the complete end of China. What do you think of that? Do you think we have a violent end in our future, or hopefully not?
Well, obviously, I hope not. I think that it's not that easy to do. There's always that possibility, but it's going to be really hard because the world is watching. Hong Kong is one of the most important financial hubs in the world. And for China to just roll tanks in there, there's going to be huge global repercussions. And China will lose a ton of allies, will lose a ton of its reputation, a lot of its goodwill. And I think that decision, while possible, I hope is unlikely. I think it's unlikely because, but I'm not sure what they're going to do. But mass slaughter, it's really hard. I mean, and they tried it with Tiananmen Square. They did it with Tiananmen Square, and that shut China down. But Hong Kong, the people are different. They've tasted freedom. They're not going to give up as easily, and they're finding that out. That China is behind a lot of these repressions by the police. But it's going to be tough for them to really quash Hong Kong. I don't think they don't know what to do. And hopefully what will happen is that in the meantime, they will be trying to figure out what is their best option long enough that it will foment rebellion in more of China and that it will alter China as we know it. So, and we're trying to be a part of that. We'd like to make a feature film from this. We've got great concept. We've had audience support. And so we're looking for funders and backers for the feature film. So, if people want to be part of that, and help in another stepping stone and pulling out another brick in the wall of China, then please get in touch with me.
Great. What's the website?
tankmanthemovie.com.
Excellent. So everybody, you can go to Tankman the Movie. They've got all their socials up around that same Tankman the Movie. Please check out this episode and share it with your friends. Consider donating to making this into a feature film. Thank you so much, Robert, for coming and sharing, what your journey has been like so far. And maybe we can get an update at some point. Thank you for your activism. And thank you to our special sponsors, Voltoro, of course, and our friends over at the Haven app. So go to gethaven.app. And then if you go to voltoro.gold/Tatiana, you can hang with me and get some zero trading fees for the first 3 months. So thanks, everybody. We'll check you later. That's Tatiana Show. That's TatianaShow.com. Bye now. Hey there, it's time for the show. The Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.